Hey, this is Ariel, and you're listening to the Cyber PR Music Podcast, dispatches for the new music business.
Hi, it's Ariel. Welcome to the Cyber PR Music Podcast and vodcast. You get a video, you get an audio. And today, this one's for the ladies and the brave men who feel like listening in because there's a lot to learn about a woman's journey. This beautiful soul over here is Bree Noble, a friend and colleague for Bree. How long is it now?
Potentially 11 years.
Okay, 11. That's a good number. Bree is, when I started my nerdy podcasting digital PR research, Bree was one of the first people that I came across. And she had, at that time, an internet radio station where she was streaming female musicians. And that has since morphed into something much, much bigger and greater. I will let her take us through the details. Please tell us a little about how you got here.
Oh, I'd love to. So first of all, I have to mention, I don't know if you remember, the first time we met, we were on like this roundtable discussion together online, like on the phone or something. And they were having this conversation about, music and PR and all that. And we were on this together. And I was like, wow, this person's awesome. She knows what she's talking about. I need to look more up about her. And so that's how you kind of came onto my radar. It was probably some online radio station or something that was doing an interview. But in 2000, very end of 2007, I started a radio station called Women of Substance Radio. And it had actually been something that I had created way back in 2000, just as like my own personal playlist to listen to at work. And I had met a lot of amazing female artists on mp3.com. If any of you remember that, that's like way back in the day. Yeah. So I had a lot of my music on there, and I've been doing really well on their charts and everything. And I'd met some other really great artists from there that I liked. And so I kind of created this like playlist that I listened to at work, and I called it Women of Substance because it was just women with either amazing sound, amazing lyrics, all of the above. And so it had to be at a certain standard for me to play it, and it couldn't be like fluffy party music. So it needed to be like really deep singer-songwriter or like really amazing pop. And so that was what I created. And then along the way, Live 365 just like decided to charge people to have this. It was free, it's that model where they like get you hooked and then they charge you. So I was like, oh, I can't focus on this right now. And I just kind of let it lay dormant for several years. And while I was a touring musician in the mid 2000s, I just started to meet even more amazing women. And I'm like, I really want to just get their music out to the world. And so I started looking back into ramping up this station again. And that was when I decided to like go all in and create a station that I would be promoting and marketing and helping all the women that I put on there to advance their own careers through it too. And along the way I played a few of my own songs, but that was not the goal. The goal was there's so much amazing music here and I want people to hear it.
Amazing. So fast forward, now you've got a mini empire. You still do Women of Substance, which is now a podcast. You've got Femme Musician, which is also a podcast where you're doing interviews and talking to people in the industry. Plus, you've got this amazing summit, the Profitable Musician Summit, which is now in its second year, which is something we definitely will be talking about. So Bree has been on a lot of interviews. This is probably not the first time you're coming across her. And in our pre-call chat, pre-taping chat, I really want to bring out a topic that doesn't often get discussed with her. And she's an amazing resource for this. So what we are going to focus on today is the journey of the female artist and how it differs slightly from the journey of a male artist. Obviously, we're coming off of a big Me Too year. As we know, the music industry has gotten the impact kind of later than everyone else, which for any of us that have been in and around it, it's not surprising. And the reasons for that, that's a whole other episode, but women are still in not a pole position in this industry, and we're still outnumbered by the men pretty enormously. But what I do want to focus on here is women relate very differently to one another. We tend to lean on each other in different ways than our male counterparts do. So Bree and I have cooked up some different things that we'd like to point out and talk about. And Bree has interviewed so many fabulous artists. We're going to also point out some of her past podcast interviews, one of which is my favorite that I recommend and make all of my clients listen to. But I want to dive in here, and let's start with, when you're thinking about the journey of, I'm an artist or I'm a player, I want to go out on the road in someone else's band. How is this inherently different for a woman than for a man starting on a journey?
I mean, I'd like to say that it isn't different, but it is. And I think it's just because of the way that we know that people are viewing us as female musicians maybe makes us act differently and tugs on our confidence a little bit. I've heard a lot of artists that I work with say, so many times I would go and I'd be like taking stuff in to get ready for a gig, and people would say, "Oh, are you the girlfriend of the guitarist?" They're like, "No, I am the guitarist, or I am the headliner." And so there's just this assumption that you're walking into that is there, and you hope is not there, but most of the time it is kind of there subconsciously in the back of people's minds, that they're not thinking that you could be the one that people are coming to see.
Yeah.
And I experienced this in corporate, being a director of finance. I was the only woman on a team, executive team of males. And people would be like, "Oh, you're the accountant." I'm like, "No, I'm the director of finance. I'm on the executive team."
Mm-hmm.
And you have to go out and make people understand what you are, and your importance without sounding self-important, which is hard.
Yeah. And
right?
also without sounding defensive, which
Yes.
I started when I was really young. I started my business when I was 23. I was a booking agent in the beginning, and I used to go on the road with the bands, and same thing. People would say, "Oh, which one in the band is your boyfriend?" And I'd be like, "Actually, the band is here because I booked this gig." And then it carried on for years. 10 years into my career, I was managing a hip hop artist, Pete Miser, and we had a huge meeting at a giant PR firm. And this was a real moment of reckoning. And I'm only talking about this because this is the reckoning that you're talking about. It's on the industry side as well as on the artist side. So we had this great meeting with this huge PR firm, which PS was owned by women. And we went in for the meeting. We talked through the campaign with my artist, and we were really excited about hiring them for over $10,000. It was a huge investment at the time for this artist. And he went to the men's room, and she said to me the minute he got up and left, "So how long have you guys been dating?"
Oh.
And I thought, wow, is it because I'm enthusiastic about my client that makes you think that? Anyway, so we will all experience these moments, and it's those times when it's like, what are you going to bring up? Are you going to bring up being offended? Are you going to bring up being defensive? How do you disarm them so that you're still in the game and you don't look like you're defensive or bitchy, which is another fabulous term women immediately get assigned for just being assertive. So I think that is a foundational reality for women.
Yeah, and I think that you have to exude that confidence or you will be taken advantage of. I mean, there's so many stories that I've heard of people in the studio, and just those little jabs, like that, I know more than you, or, you're just here because I let you be here, and they're just like these undertones.
Said no producer ever to anyone. Okay, so
right.
This definitely doesn't want to be a bitch session, but
no.
There's a foundation that we're operating from here, and there it is. But so, okay, how can you, or I think the thing that we did talk about, which I loved, is women leaning on other women for support. There's been a huge study that's been happening, and it's really a major priority for Women in Music, the organization, this year, which is many, many women in the industry have voiced a deep desire to get mentors. Many women in the industry feel like, men tend to have more mentors and men get mentored. And so I'd like to spend some time talking about how women at any stage of your career, whether you are just starting out and building up or you already are way into your career, the importance of mentoring. And I think that we've created an idea about what a mentor is, that it's this like person like Bree, who's like, you pay Bree or you pay a Carrie Cole, which is totally legit, but it's not maybe the first step. And there's definitely such a thing as peer mentoring.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I just got a question today. Someone said, like, if you could do something differently from the beginning of your career, what would you do? And I said, I would have gotten a mentor so much earlier because I was just spinning my wheels and lost, and I didn't have to be. And a mentor can just be somebody that's just a little bit ahead of you down the road. And once, the reason that I created the communities that I have for women is because one of the reasons I actually started to get traction finally in my career is that I had a group of women that I was in who were, like I said, a little bit further down the road than I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had somewhere to see examples of what I should be doing, to ask questions. And it was just a peer mentoring kind of group. And that's one reason I created my free community on Facebook, because I know that not everybody is ready to jump into even the Female Musician Academy, let alone working with somebody like Carrie Cole or, bigger names out there, or hiring you. They need somewhere that they can go when they're beginning and not feel like their questions are dumb because they're really new and they're babies in the industry and they need to know certain things before they can move to those levels.
For sure. So one thing that I find incredibly helpful for my own career is I started something called Ladies Social. And the intention of Ladies Social, it's not only music industry women, although many women are involved in music. But what we decided to do, a best friend of mine, her name is Ileana Kadushin, and she has her own podcast, Now I Know podcast. She's a very well-known voiceover actor and fabulous musician. I was her publicist. That's how we met. We created Ladies Social, and the whole vision around that was she knew a whole lot of really fabulous women. I knew a whole lot of really fabulous women. Many of us were not only entrepreneurs, but just, beginning to come up in our careers. And we wanted a place where we could get together. And we do once a month. Everybody comes to my house. We drink a lot of wine. And we started out just going around in a circle and just sort of talking about just, first of all, an introduction, but then just talking about like things that were on our mind and just shooting the breeze and getting opinions, like getting support or help. And then over the years, we started honing our little mastermind group. And now we have themes. So one theme might be self-care. How are you taking care of yourself? One theme might be partnership, either in your love life or in your businesses. How are your partnerships unfolding for you? One theme might be advocating for yourself. Where don't you? Where do you? And we end up really advising each other as peers. So for those of you that are sort of obsessed with like, I must get a mentor and they have to be running a record label or something crazy like that, just look around your life. And there might be some really interesting people. I also think, and tell me your thoughts about this, not having only music industry people, because you're running a business here. And so I learned from a lot of mentors that had nothing to do with the music industry. T. Harv Eker, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, was one of my biggest mentors when I was really ramping up my business. And all he talked about was money, how to make money, mindset around money. And that was huge for me. And then I've had many other mentors that I've hired and been in their mastermind groups having nothing to do with the music industry. So I think that's another option for those of you that feel mentorless.
Yeah, I think for me, this is the first year that I've actually been in a mastermind of people that help musicians. It's always been just business people across the board. And you can get such a great perspective from people that are in different industries, and instead of living in this bubble, and I think especially for musicians, we tend to get that whole like starving artist mentality. And when we hang out together, we can kind of perpetuate that. Whereas someone else will come in and they're like a coach and they're like, well, of course I asked $2,500 from my clients because that's what I should charge. And we're like, oh, maybe I can do that.
Totally. So this is a perfect segue. You have a new book that's just come out about money and how to make it, how to think about it, and you've got a summit. Tell us a little bit about that.
I thought it was really important to focus on the money side, which is why I created the summit, because so many musicians don't. And I was one of those people, which is a little crazy because I was an accountant, I was a director of finance, right? But when I started as a musician, it was like I just completely threw that stuff out the window. And like, now I'm a musician, so I don't, do this finance stuff. And, only when I realized that like I'm running a small business did I start to say, okay, I need to bring in this entrepreneurship and stuff that I learned in school as a business major and marry the two together. And along the way with artists and women of substance, I just saw so many artists in that same boat. They thought someone else was going to come in and do all that business stuff for them, and even marketing. And so that was kind of why I created the Female Entrepreneur Musician, because I wanted people to learn the entrepreneurial stuff. And the first hurdle was always getting them to realize that as a musician, they are an entrepreneur and that they really can't ignore that side of what they do, or they don't have a real business. Mm-hmm. So, and then with the Profitable Musician Summit, I wanted to take that up a notch and say, okay, now that you realize you have a business, like, let's make you the CEO of your business. Let's give you all the tools that you need to manage your money, to make more money, from what you're already making, expand on those income streams, add some new ones, and be strategic about it. And then make sure that you keep more of the money that you made. That's the kind of this year's theme, is like how to make more money and then keep more of what you earned. Because otherwise we can kind of spin our wheels trying to create more income. And there's a lot of talk about that. But then, the money is just being hemorrhaged out the other side without us realizing, because we're buying equipment we don't need, and we're not tracking our expenses when we're on tour, and all kinds of things like that maybe artists don't get excited about. They don't sound sexy, but they need them.
Right.
So I'm trying to give you a dose of what you want plus a dose of what you need.
Which, as artists, this is really hard. I consider my business very, very creative. I think that's anyone that's working around creative people. You're not creative. So I would agree with this. And it was when I really started focusing on money. And I had to have some painful conversations. I hired people like accountants, and my friend is an MBA, and I hired her, and she came in and she counted all of the hours that my team was spending on PR campaigns versus what we were charging for them. And that was like getting a smack in the face. And she was like, basically, this is why you're always struggling, because you charge $1,000 and then you work 100 hours and like it's not coming out. So it was really interesting to get that type of perspective. But I want to present something else, which is an additional annoyance when you're looking at money and how it comes in the industry. And that has to do a lot with where we're focusing our attention. So right now, one of the hot things that everybody is, of course, talking about is playlists, Spotify, getting on playlists, getting our streams up across any streaming platform, and how this is necessary. And there's these there's a lot of news about how the streaming business is the thing that's driving the record business. But I always want to point this out. You're not in the record business unless you're signed to a major record label, and that's your reality. You're in the music industry. You're in a different place. So what I have seen a lot, like you just said, is like when you start to track, like if I spend thousands of dollars promoting myself on Spotify playlists, and the result of not understanding where that fits into the bigger picture is you get a check for 49 cents from Spotify. Now, you don't always want to measure your ROI with how much money comes back at you, but what I love about your work, Bree, is you're looking at the other places where actually money is made so that better choices can be made. So like, yes, licensing is a big one, but it's interesting. Licensing is very hard to do. It requires really understanding the licensing world, spending a lot of time in it. It's just not a magical income stream that you just launch and go for very quickly. So often artists come to me and they're like, well, I want to be film and TV licensing, and I want to be on the road, and I want to, and I'm like, okay, we have to choose, strengthen one muscle at a time.
Yeah, licensing is almost its own business model. And,
Yeah.
you know, eventually you can maybe run a dual business model, but you really have to invest a lot of time and energy to learning that business. So don't recommend that anybody starts out with that. Once you got the whole artist thing dialed in, then maybe you can add that. But I think that, you know, what I want to focus on is the fundamentals, because like you said, like whatever the hot new thing is, it's Spotify playlists. But where is that really going to bring in the money? No, it's not. What's going to bring in the money is setting up a system where you are bringing in fans, you're communicating with your fans, you're getting them to come to your show. And I know that that's all like, you know, oh, I've heard that a million times, but have you done it? Have you actually put those systems into place?
Right.
Do you have an email list? Are you communicating with people? You know, that's one good reason I had Cheryl B. Engelhardt on the summit, is because, you know, email is important, and she shows how she actually made dollars from her email list based upon, I had this many people, I made this many dollars. Therefore, I know that every time I add one person to my email list, I add, you know, $2 a month or whatever, $1 a month to my income. That's motivating.
Yes.
Right. If you're just thinking about your email list as this annoying thing that you have to do, which a lot of my students do think of it that way, until I beat them over the head enough times until they realize that this is part of the money-making systems of your business, you know. But yeah, it is a lot of work, but so is every business. And I think that's another thing musicians are like, I don't want to work that hard. I like being creative. Well, I like being creative too, but I still have to send emails out or no one's going to know what's going on and no one's going to buy anything.
So on that note, what would you recommend? We all know we have to do all this stuff, even me. Like the email list thing is not sexy. It's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's so necessary. How can we lean on one another to make sure that the things that we need to do get implemented? This is where I think women almost have a leg up here. And I think that if you commit to helping each other, how about you get an email buddy? I know it sounds so stupid, but you get like an accountability partner, and every week I don't know, I know you've interviewed so many women that really pulled themselves up through the industry and are creating their own success. Any stories or any artists you'd like to cite about how they managed to really get this stuff in action?
Well, somebody that really stands out is somebody that's in my academy, because she utilizes exactly what you said. She utilizes accountability because she knows that that works for her. Her name's Catherine Mahler. She's a fiddler up in Canada. And she, you know, she's actually in 2 different accountability groups, and she works with me one-on-one because she knows that that's what motivates her. And she has done so many, you know, amazing things at growing her email list, at doing the kinds of albums and tours that she wants to do, because she's just constantly plugging away at it. And again, it's not sexy and there's no like magic pill formula. It's really about setting up a system that actually works for you. And I know that everybody has different personalities. So I tell my students, like, you don't have to conform to the way I do it. If I love a sauna and it works for me, and I love getting up at 4 a.m., but that would never work for you, don't do that just because I do it. You have to figure out the thing that works for you, and then you have to stick to that. And that's the hardest thing, is setting up I believe that consistency is one of the things that keeps artists from moving forward. One of the biggest things that I've seen in my students. And so having those groups of accountability, and with women, like in a group of women, in my experience with this, like there's just so much more compassion and empathy, and we give each other the smackdown when you need to, but I just believe that as women, like we are more communicators, and we're able to articulate what's really bothering us with other women better than we can with men. Because this year I've experienced being in a mastermind with men, me and two men, totally different vibe. But I've been in masterminds with just women, and I think there's a place for both. But like with my academy, it's amazing what people will share with each other, like physical things that they're going through, and they just need a place to be able to share that and know that they're not the only one going through it. I think that's a thing too with women too, is just knowing that you're not alone and not being isolated. Because if you're isolated in what you're going through, then you can only see what's right in front of you. You can't see that like your problem is not as big as you're making it out to be.
Right. And I mean, I think this is also the power of Me Too for the men that are sticking around listening to this. When you feel like you're the only person that something has happened to, it makes it 10 times more difficult. And for any of you that understand who Brene Brown is, and the studies she's done about women and shame, women tend to hold on to shame in a very, very different way than men do. And what I've realized as someone who coaches men and women around getting out and putting themselves out there, marketing is like holding up a giant mirror to anything that makes you feel awkward, uncomfortable. If you have shame in your past, Instagram is like a shame mirror.
Ugh.
And so people come to me and they're so stuck and upset and flipped out about social media or marketing or PR or whatever it is. 9 times out of 10 in my experience, it has nothing to do with understanding how stupid Facebook algorithms work, because there's 10 billion blog posts that could teach you how to do that. It has nothing to do with, can you figure out how many times you should tweet a day? Of course you can. That is not rocket science. But what's really going on is, what I've noticed is that there's a pain or something shameful or something embarrassing or something that is getting like rubbed up from your past that is making the whole marketing thing such a quandary. And this is something
so true
that I just feel women are suffering with more. And I have to also say, I think Instagram, when you look at what performs on Instagram, it's women in bikinis, it's your boobs, it's sexy shots, it's selfies, it's duck face, it's strippers looking like they're workout queens. This is what people are getting the most likes around. And so I think it's really, really hard to reckon putting yourself out there like that when that's not your thing. And this is not to diss people that want to do that, but I've watched a woman have a meteoric rise in social media coaching, and half of her photos on Instagram are her in a bikini. And I can't really understand how that goes with teaching someone how to use a camera for their YouTube streams, but it's how she's branding. And so for those of you that are looking at other people that are doing marketing in a way that is getting a lot of likes or a lot of attention, a lot of it might feel extremely uncomfortable. So there's a reason I'm saying this. I want to loop back around to some tools, because Bree is a woman that has a treasure chest full of tools. And it's understanding how to use them and when to pull them out, which I think can get you through a lot of these blocks around all of it. Because every time you try to get yourself a gig, every time you try to get anything, you're on a bit of a sales campaign. And that's another, it's a bit of a harsh reality for those of us that really just want to focus on the music and the creative side. Like you just said, like a lot of people just come to this because the joy of making music, of recording music, of playing music in front of people is the part that's so loved. So any tools that come to mind, I mean, one that I'd love to just say, and I sit on the board, so there's a disclaimer, but there's a community of incredible women. It's an international community. It's called Women in Music. It's womeninmusic.org. I think it's $50 if you're a student. It's $75 a year to join. And this is a community and a great tool because there's a Google group associated with it. And Bree's on it, I'm on it. Everyone that I know practically in the industry is on it. If you ever need something, it's one email away. Hey, I'm looking for a great photographer. Hey, I'm looking for a place to stay in Paris. Hey, I'm looking for whatever it is. And there's thousands of people. I need a great lawyer. I'm looking for whatever. So that's my first tool that I'd like to recommend. Men can join it as well. There's a lot of very cool men and women in music. And the men are really known in that community. So
I think that's such a good thing because, you know, as musicians, there really are so many ways we can get taken advantage of, and having the advice of the people in there and knowing that what they give us is going to be someone reputable. I see it's like the Yelp of the music industry.
Totally. And I've met so many interesting people by just asking. So that's one tool. Another tool, and Bree can explain a little bit more, is lean on her podcast. Women, if you're looking to get your music out into the world, Bree's podcast is phenomenal. It's well thought out. It's a great little stepping stone. In fact, when I write marketing plans and we write the DIY PR section, if you're a woman, it's the first thing I put on the list. It's like, go submit to her podcast. Tell us a little bit about it.
It's something that I created because of the fact that I saw that women weren't seeing people like them out there doing this stuff and having success. And so what I think that's come up in the podcast that is so cool is I tend to attract a lot of older artists, which has been really inspiring. You know, I've had people that have been super meteoric in their young age, and then as soon as they started to get older, the industry just completely abandoned them. And they're like, you know, was my worth all about being young and beautiful? You know, and then they came back and they were able to create a music career, and it was something totally different. And so if you're feeling like, you know, I don't look the way I need to look for a music career, you know, people have told me I'm too old. I've had students say that industry people have told them once you're over 30, you're done, you know. And this podcast is just inspiring. We have up now 185 episodes, and many of them are interviews from artists that maybe you've probably never heard of, but they're out there doing this thing day in and day out, building a business and being successful at it. And to me, that's the biggest thing about it, is like most of those artists you've never heard of, which is more inspiring to me as an indie artist than me, you know, interviewing famous people, you know, Lady Gaga or whatever. Like, yeah, I already know she's doing it. I want to see people like me.
So my favorite episode is episode 126, and I will put this in the show notes. I always recommend most of my artists start by listening to it, because that episode is about incremental wins and how, like you said earlier, there's no like magic fairy that's going to show up and make your music career. And I love that interview. It's so poignant, and it says so much. Daphne Willis is the artist that you interviewed, and Daphne has a really interesting story, had a huge deal that happened to her and thought like her ship had come in, and then the reality of what that really was about unfolded and how she sustains. So go back through. I think you'll get, this is a great tool for you, is to listen to some of the stories of other women. And this is also, by the way, getting mentored. I think we think of a mentor as like, I must go and meet for coffee and they will tell me something magical. It's amazing. You can just listen to podcasts and get mentored. And in any area that you feel like you need help, not just in the music business, although there's so many great music industry podcasts. Any other tools that come to mind, Bree, that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, I want to mention about Daphne's episode. One thing that stands out to me about that is if you feel like you have to have this huge following to be successful, on there she talks about how she's got, I believe it's a Facebook group and a community, a small community, but a very engaged community. And she has seen so much support for all of her new albums and singles through that is basically fueling her career. And so I think, starting your own community wherever your people like to hang out, I think is a tool that we have the ability to use. I mean, when I was starting my music career, I couldn't gather people like that. I would have had to have a community in my hometown where I like invited people to a coffee shop. And, this is somewhere where you can create a group where you can invite people that like your music and that have like a common mission or, are really on board with your message as an artist. And you can have conversations about stuff that doesn't necessarily even have to do with your music. You can just befriend them. And that's how you can grow your music. I consider all the people that I work with as friends as well. Like, I don't like to think about fans. I think that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's funny. I interviewed Tony Van Veen recently, and he said, the minute you think of your audience as your fans, that's you're up here and they're down there. And I thought that was such a great, it's exactly what you just said. It's the thing. And social media has kind of bombed all that out, right? I mean, it's funny when I answer my phone, often people are like, I didn't expect you to be answering your phone. And I'm like, well, how did you expect me to make any money? There's no like person that's gonna line that up for me, right? So even people that have large followings, like I'm loving Patreon. That's a tool for once you get this conversation sort of going and you can identify people that are there to support you. It's a little less jarring than a crowdfunding campaign. It's a tool where you can say, hey, give me $2 a month, give me $5 a month. And there's so many wonderful examples of artists that are leveraging their communities and have people more than willing to support them, which is yet another income stream.
Yeah, and I got to mention, as far as tools, like I have been resisting this for a while, but I'm actually starting to really love it, and that's Instagram stories. Because I do feel like it is not like the feed. It is so much more real. You don't have to be all like perfectly, I went outside and I was on a walk and the wind was blowing my hair in my face and, and I'm on a story and I don't have to feel like I have to get all perfect. And you can just say something quickly, and then if it like doesn't land with people, it has disappeared, so it doesn't matter. But you can just, like, as musicians, like, we're super creative, and stories allows you to be really creative with the messages and be more behind the scenes with your your audience.
Very cool. Are there any artists who you can think of? We'll wrap up with this as a tool. The beautiful thing about social to me is you can go and look at what other people are doing and borrow, don't steal. And get inspired by what looks good and what seems to be resonating and test it out for yourself. I mean, this is one of the other things that's so phenomenal about the barriers that are broken down and why I don't think anyone should really pay when you're a new artist for a PR campaign, because you can do your own PR and there's so much you can do. Any artists stand out for you who are really leveraging Instagram stories or social media in a way that stands out?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask this question because I'm pretty stingy about the time I spend on social because I don't want to feel like I'm living my life online. So I don't follow a lot of artists. I try to look occasionally to see what my students are doing to make sure that, they're actually following what I try to tell them to do. But, I would say somebody like we talked earlier about Lauren Spring and the Crickets. And I know that I've not followed them on social, but I know that they had a lot of success with their very first crowdfunding campaign, just interacting with people on social and, letting people know what they're doing. And they
Yep.
were very authentic about it.
Yep. And their second campaign also went well. And if you look at what the Crickets are doing, it's Crickets with a K. They interact with everyone that says anything to them. So they're really good at responding. They're a great example. I'll throw another one in. Doesn't have a huge following, but her Instagram is so on point and beautiful. And she's really leveraged using saturated colors and a LA vibe. And that's Lauren Waller. She's actually been on one of your podcasts, but she's really phenomenal. And when I met her and we started coaching her about her social media, her Instagram feed did not look like that. So she really does a great job. She chooses colors, and she's very good at curating photos. And she's a young singer-songwriter, so you're kind of seeing her journey. And her friends are there, LA is there. You can see different themes that are really coming out. And go give her a follow, and you can see her.
Cool.
So for those of you who are women who feel mentorless, I hope this has helped you. Listen to podcasts, get in some mastermind groups, start exploring how you can become part of free communities. Bree's community. Is your community free, Bree?
Yeah, so I have the academy, which is not free, but that also includes a ton of training and like live group coaching. But the female indie musician community on Facebook, it is free. We have over 3,500 women in there, and it's very engaged. People are constantly helping each other.
Beautiful. So also Women in Music. It's a not-for-profit, by the way, so your money goes to helping keep the cause alive. I highly recommend you check them out and subscribe to Bree's podcast. Take a listen to that. Come join. I'm actually in the Profitable Musician Summit. I'll be talking about Spotify and playlisting. And there's some phenomenal peers and amazing teachers. So do come join that. All of this and more will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Bree. Any parting advice you'd like to leave the listeners with?
I think my parting advice is always about finding a community. So luckily we've given you guys tons of ways to find community on this episode. So to me, that was the thing that pulled me out of my funk, my isolation, my overwhelm and confusion about what to do to build a music career. And all I really needed was to connect with people a little bit further down the road than me. So go do that. Find a community that resonates with you from the things we mentioned or something else, and just plug yourself in.
Beautiful. I got nothing more to say. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been super fun.